He said, why don't you play with an amp? I said, well, the amp messes up my sound. He said, no, the amp amplifies your sound. Your sound was messed up before you plugged into that amp.
Hi, and welcome to ForBassPlayersOnly.com. I'm John Liebman, founder and first baseman. Great interview this week with Richie Goods. Great stories about all his time that he spent with Mulgrew Miller and Ron Carter and Ray Brown. Just awesome interview. But first, if you've ever wanted to learn bass, but you think maybe you're too old, you're not too old. I don't even know how old you are. You're not too old. Or you think maybe your body won't cooperate. You should know that right now there are thousands of people inside the For Bass Players Only community. A lot of them in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, men and women. And you know what they're doing? They're learning bass. They're having the time of their life playing music that they love. Come join them and experience that incredible transformation for yourself. As I always say, you're never too old to groove. So let's play bass. Richie Goods, you're going to love this interview. Richie is a renowned jazz and funk bassist, originally from Pittsburgh, PA. He attended Berklee College of Music in Boston, and after that, he moved to New York, where he studied with Ron Carter, and he studied with Ray Brown also, followed by being mentored by jazz legend Mulgrew Miller for over 9 years. Richie has also toured or recorded with jazz and pop luminaries, including Headhunters, Lewis Hayes and the Cannonball Adderley Legacy Band, Milt Jackson, Russell Malone, Manhattan Transfer, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, Whitney Houston, Chris Bodie, Christina Aguilera, quite a cross section of musical artists. He's most notably known for his Grammy winning albums that he played on, albums by Alicia Keys and hip hop artist Common. Richie's most recent release, Connected, features vibraphonist Chen Chen Lu, and that was released in January of 2023. Here's my interview with Richie. Hi, Richie.
Hey, John, how are you?
All right, it's so nice to meet you in person. You've done so much incredible stuff that I want to talk about. You are originally from Pittsburgh, is that right?
Exactly, yes.
Quite a rich musical heritage.
Oh
Well,
my God, yes.
I wouldn't know anything about that. I'm from Detroit. Nobody good ever came out of Detroit, right? But no,
Well, actually, I have debates all the time with people from Detroit who has the richest jazz legacy, Pittsburgh or Detroit, and we're pretty close.
anybody from Philly ever chime into that conversation?
Yes, definitely. Those are the main three places, Philly, Pittsburgh, and Chicago.
Well, Pittsburgh, you claim, who is it, George Benson and Ahmad Jamal, Ray Brown, and you must know Paul Thompson.
Oh, of course, yes.
I love Paul. Who doesn't love
Great bass
Paul?
player.
I did a great interview with him, I don't know, a year or two ago. Great guy. But okay, yeah, and I had some family in Pittsburgh. I actually, my earliest years were in Cleveland, and I had some family in Pittsburgh, so we used to drive there all the time. And I have fond memories of Pittsburgh when I was very young. But tell me about your experience. Let's start with the early days and your initial exposure to music. And you come from a musical family where there are records playing, brothers and sisters, your parents have, take you to concerts, anything like that. What was your initial exposure to music like, and what attracted you to the bass?
Wow. Well, first of all, I do come from a musical family. I'm the only professional musician, but my mother was semi-professional. She did Broadway show stuff, performing, and sometimes playing for off-Broadway stuff. And she played for our church, played
Played what? Piano.
piano, and but she also played guitar and she sings. And so I think everyone in my family around the age of 5 starts playing piano, and then they play another instrument. So almost everyone plays two instruments, but I'm the only one that did it, professionally. I played, I always wanted to play the drums. My mother said, well, You have to learn to play the piano first, then you can play the drums. So I took piano lessons from 5 till I was 8 years old. Then I started taking drum lessons, and I just start after that. I just start switching around instruments. I was playing guitar for a while. I was playing saxophone for a while. I played vibraphones in the jazz band, not vibes, xylophone. And so in high school, I ended up, yeah, just picking up a bass just to mess around. I always thought I was a drummer, but I picked up a bass just to mess around and just absolutely fell in love with it.
Excuse me, electric or upright?
This was electric.
Really? Okay. Were you in the band in high school?
Yeah, this was the performing arts high school where Paul Thompson actually teaches there.
Ah,
And Roger Humphreys was the percussion teacher there.
okay.
And so when I auditioned actually on drums and saxophone. So Roger, I wasn't good enough to play the drums in the jazz band, but he said, "But you're a percussionist. You play piano. Play the vibraphone." So I was playing the vibraphone, and then when I picked up the bass, I just started practicing. I was addicted. I couldn't put it down. Every day, like I would just go home from school just nonstop till like 2 in the morning. I would sleep with it literally. And after 2 months of practicing, these guys heard me, asked me to be in their band. I was like, playing bass? No, I'm a drummer. But I ended up playing in this. We did rock and R&B music. But then a year later, my second year in high school, they said we need a bass player for the jazz band. I was like, I definitely can't play jazz on the bass, but I learned really fast. And yeah, and it wasn't until really about my senior year in high school where I started messing around with the acoustic bass.
Okay. So once you discovered the bass, I imagine you started listening to music differently and picking out the bass parts, and you probably had a few bass player names. Did you have any musical influences?
Oh my God. Well, first of all, talking about listening to music differently, when I was a drummer, I was a metalhead. I was so into heavy metal.
Really? Like
And,
who?
and um, Ronnie James Dio, Motley Crue, Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden. Yeah, yeah, I
Okay.
was deep into it. But when I got the bass, I was playing it, and it was too easy. It got boring. And some guys in my school had an R&B band, and they said, you know, the bass player was Chance Howard that ended up playing with Prince years later, and he was a big influence on me, and that he's part of the reason I wanted to play the bass because he was just an amazing bassist. So he was like, "Man, you listen to heavy metal stuff? No, you got to listen to this R&B stuff," which I always listened to. My family always listened to R&B stuff, but so now he got me checking out the bass lines on like Cameo and The Time and Prince and I was like, "Oh my God, okay, this is what I need to deal with." So at first it was like R&B and funk music, and then later on, yeah, from being in the jazz band, I just started checking out a lot of jazz. So I guess the first name in bass was Bootsy Collins. I mean, yeah, Bootsy was it for me because being a young, a black person in the growing up in the 70s and 80s, when someone asked you, how does that song go? You didn't sing the melody, you sang the bass line. It was all about the bass, and Bootsy Collins was it for bass. So
Uh,
I started with Bootsy, then I graduated to Stanley Clark because I heard him live and was blown away. And he's the reason I started playing acoustic bass because I thought he was the best in the world, and I wanted to be the best. And he played upright and electric, so I said I have to play upright. But so he was my intro to upright bass, but then also being around Roger Humphreys a lot, um, he had me listening to Ray Brown, and so Ray Brown was, one of my first straight ahead influences on the bass. Then, of course, Ron Carter and Paul Chambers.
Wow.
So that was all high school years.
I'm struck by that. I just think of two completely different cultures. On the one hand, I don't know, Nikki Sixx and Geezer and Steve Harris. And then all of a sudden, not all this, well, yeah, maybe all of a sudden, Stanley and Ray Brown and Paul Chambers. And no, was it like flipping a switch, or did you still listen to the metal stuff after you discovered jazz?
I mean, I still occasionally listen to metal. One thing I've always loved about heavy metal is like, man, this energy that they bring. And as much as I love jazz, I think jazz should bring that same energy. And I think that's how the guys played back in the day, with this energy of, you know, I don't know, because it was started out as dance music.
Yeah.
So you had to be energetic and uplifting. But I think today a lot of people play jazz, you know, almost like hotel music. Background is just very light and just, you know. And I played with Mulgrew Miller for 9 years, and he played with this, oh my God, this energy. Normally when the horns play, there's this energy, and then when the piano plays,
Yeah.
it dips a little bit. It's the opposite with Mulgrew, because he played with Tony Williams, he played with Art Blakey, and he said if you didn't bring the energy with them, you just get run over.
Wasn't
So
Blakey
I've
from
always
Pittsburgh
loved
too?
that energy. Yes, he was.
I thought so. I saw him at Baker's Keyboard Lounge in Detroit.
Really?
Yeah, boy, that was a long time ago. Now, I'm also thinking about what I talk about culture with the metal. I think of guys with long hair and probably braided beards and the bass hanging down by their knees and playing with a pick. And R&B, I'm
Yeah,
thinking of more of a finger style approach. Would you agree
yeah,
with that from your experience?
yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And if I ever get a chance to play anything rockish or metal, I get so excited to pick up a pick because it's a different sound. It's a different kind of thing. And I did, when I was playing more R&B, I kind of had my bass kind of high up on,
Yeah.
and but I was really into slapping. I really got into Marcus Miller, Larry Graham, Louis Johnson, and I think in the 80s and probably 90s, I was just really into the slap thing.
What about, if I can interject in a different world here, what about somebody like Mark King? Was he on your radar as well?
Oh yeah. It's interesting. I always admired his bass playing, but I just loved his music. The Level 42. I was like, okay, finally, like some pop music with substance. Like, I mean, guys are really playing, and he's just, I don't know how he is doing all this slapping and just singing lead vocals. So he was definitely on my radar. But I would check out some of his bass lines, but not like I checked out like Marcus or Larry Graham.
I mention it because it's just such a different world, Mark King and Level 42 compared to the other guys that you mentioned, Marcus and Stanley and Larry. Well, how did your career get rolling? I do want to talk about Mulgrew and I want to talk more about your career, but tell me about how you transitioned from just picking up a bass in high school and then picking up the upright, and then what about life after high school? How did that transition into a career for you? When did that actually begin?
Well, I went to right after high school, I went to Berklee College of Music, and I was special in Pittsburgh, being, a teenager and playing with the the cats on the scene in Pittsburgh. But then I got to Berkeley. I was like, oh my God, everybody is special here. And I've never forget. I wish I remembered this guy's name, but this guy, he was a heavy metal dude and looked so heavy metal. I remember he played a Padula, and um I heard him in a recital playing this heavy metal stuff. And I was like, yeah, but I'm more of a jazz R&B player. And he started playing all of Jocko's stuff too, solos and everything. I was like, oh my God. And he's not even a jazz player, really. And so I was like, man, I better get in the shed.
Just curious, who were your bass teachers at Berkeley?
Uh, Whit Brown. Well, I'll tell you my first and favorite teacher was John Neves.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know John Neves, but he played with a lot of the greats back um in the 60s and everything and 70s. But and I will always be grateful to him because I thought he was going to teach me some of the hippest stuff because he played with all the cats, and I told him all this stuff I wanted to learn and all this stuff, and he said he said okay, oh that's great. How's your reading? I said oh my reading it's okay. He said here I'll read this, and I struggled through it. He said we're going to work on your reading. And that's all we did for the first year. And I'm so grateful because it just opened up so many doors for me.
Yeah.
The other stuff I got later, but if it wasn't for him, I don't think I would have got the reading part. So he was one of my favorites. I studied with Whit Brown. He was great. I also studied with Bruce Gertz.
I was waiting for you to say Bruce's name.
Well, Bruce is interesting, and I wanted to study with Bruce because I would hear him play around Boston, and I thought he was such a great bass player. But as a teacher, our lessons were just kind of. He would say, "What do you want to do?" I always just wanted to play. He said, "Well, let's jam," and every lesson would just start out. He would call a tune, we would play, and then I would stop him. He would play some crazy stuff. I'm like, what's that you just played? And then he'd give me a bunch of papers on it. Oh, it's altered scale. This is this, and this is this pattern,
Excuse me,
and I would
trying to
just go.
picture this. Were you both on upright, or were you both on electric, or one of each, or what?
We were both on electric, and occasionally he would be on upright, I would be on electric. But yeah, so we were just jamming two basses, and that was fun.
Did you do a lot
Yeah.
of stuff in Boston? My son went to Berkeley. He's a guitar player.
Oh,
He's
really?
actually a very
Oh,
good
wow.
bass player too. But I remember going to there was a jazz club called Riles. I think it was in Cambridge, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I used to play there, and man, I played so much because after my first year, I had to pay my own rent and my own tuition, and I had, a partial scholarship, but I still needed money. And I didn't really have any help. My mom, after she helped me my first year, she's like, "Baby, after this, I really can't help you." And so, actually, Dave Dyson, he I knew Dave would work so much around Boston. He was the number one call for every kind of gig. And so I hit him up, and I got to know him, pretty good. And so I called him and I was like, "Dave, man, I need some work." I was doing a job waiting tables, but I said I need some gigs. And he said, "Oh, no problem, man. I'll start recommending you." And so people start calling me for weddings and parties and also the clubs. Um, Actually, it was a lot of smooth jazz in Boston too. I would do a lot of that.
I was
But
thinking they
then
call it GB in Boston, right? General business.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's only a Boston thing,
I
right?
know. In LA, they're casuals. In New York and Miami, they're club dates. You did the GB.
Yeah. Right. But I remember the next year, I guess it was maybe my sophomore year, Dave Dyson called me. He said, "Man, Richie, yeah, I'm leaving town. I'm going on the road. I got the gig with New Kids on the Block."
Yeah.
So he said, "I'm just letting you know I'm passing down all my gigs to you." Man, the next week my phone just started ringing off the hook. And
Awesome.
I was just working like crazy in Boston. I would do in the summertime, I would do like 3 gigs in on Saturday, maybe two on Saturday. I would do a church gig or a brunch gig in the morning, and then I would do a wedding in the afternoon, and then I would do, the club where we were playing some jazz, either Wally's or like a smooth jazz club or something. Yeah, I was working like crazy.
Sounds like my son. That sounds like me in the 80s in Miami. So,
Oh
so
yeah.
did you stay? Your voice is a little out of sync with the video. I don't know if the final version of this is going to come out that way. Am I like that too?
Oh
I
no, I hope not.
I don't know. I see your
No,
lips
you
moving and then I hear your voice. So I hope it.
I wonder if it's because I'm using my AirPods, the Bluetooth or something.
Oh, that would
But
only.
you look fine on my screen.
Oh, thank you. And you look marvelous too.
And you
So, did you hang around in Boston after Berkeley, or did you go back to Pittsburgh? Did you go New York, somewhere else? What did you do after Berkeley?
Well, after I graduated, I stayed in Boston for another 2 years. I mean, it got really comfortable. It was like um, I was working so much and everything, and things were cool. But after a while, I've I felt like there was a ceiling
Hmm.
where, I felt there was only so far I could go if I
Know that
stayed in Boston.
know that feeling.
And yeah, but I right after Berkeley, this the scary part for me was actually graduating from Berkeley. Because as you know, a lot of the cats don't graduate. They get a gig, after being there a couple years and they're out. I graduated. I was like, oh wow, now what? Where's the gig? But shortly after, like maybe a month or two after I graduated, I started touring with Christopher Holiday. I'm not sure if you know him, but um, he was a young saxophone player that was on RCA Novus. They were signing the same label with Roy Hargrove and Mark Whitfield, Antonio Hart.
Yeah.
And so I joined his band with Ron Savage and Anthony Wanzi, and we toured for a year. That band broke up, and then I was playing around Boston a lot with Walter Beasley, and Walter was doing a tour with Brian McKnight, and Brian didn't have a band, so Walter's band ended up playing for Brian and Walter, and so I was doing that. But when I was in Chris uh, Christopher Holiday's band, we did a week in New York at Sweet Basil, and Mulgrew Miller was there. And Anthony Wanzi, our pianist, was really cool with him. And so I got to hang out, a good part of the week with Mulgrew. And he said at the end of the week, he said, "Man, Richie, you sound really good, man." He said, "I'm gonna call you." And I was like, "Yeah, whatever. He's not gonna call me." And it was a year later, I was in Brian McKnight's band and he called. So I left Brian and Walter. And Brian and Walter were working like crazy, but Mulgrew I kind of rolled the dice because he just had 2 nights or 3 nights in New York at a little club, Vigione's. Do you remember Vigione's?
No, I don't remember
Uh,
that.
yeah, it was right next on the same block as the Blue Note.
Okay.
But he said if these gigs go well, I might have a few other things for you. So I left Brian's tour, um, just expecting to get the gig with Mulgrew, and it went well. but it was rough because Brian's gig and Walter's gig, it was all electric bass. And I hadn't touched an acoustic bass in about 6 months. And so as soon as I came off the road with
I
Brian,
know that feeling
I
too.
had, oh my God, I had just like a few days to practice for Mulgrew's gig. And I'm practicing, but my fingers didn't really get hard enough. And I played that first night, and the rest of the weekend, it was just painful. I just wanted to cry. My fingers were bleeding, but I'm like, I'm getting this gig. I'm gonna get this gig. I don't care how much pain I'm in. And and it went well. So that it started 9 year, 10 year with
Wow. Did you ever study classical double bass with the bow and all that Samandel method and that route?
I did. I mean, when people ask me, did I study classical? I say no, but I did. My first bass teacher, my senior year at in high school, Jeff Mangone, bassist. He plays jazz and classical. He plays for the Pittsburgh Symphony, and he did have me studying out of the Samandel book. So I still work out of that Samandel book just for exercises, you know.
Classic stuff. All right, so you're with
Yeah.
Mulgrew for 9 years, 10 years. You must have something you can share with us about Mulgrew Miller, your experience or something about him or stories or something that you learned or anything at all. Jump
Um,
in anywhere.
man, man, I get kind of emotional talking about Mogu because he was the most amazing person I've ever met and the most amazing pianist. And I find myself to this day, like when and because now leading my own band and stuff goes down on the road and trying to deal with situations, I always think, what would Mulgrew do? How would he handle this? Because he had this real Zen thing. He wasn't a pushover at all. Like, you know, Mulgrew would stand his ground, but he could do it so gracefully, and he was the most tolerant person. Like he was almost like a goody two shoe, but he could hang out with the worst of them, with no judgment. You know what I mean? And so I think I got a lot from him musically, but I think I got more from him about just life and just how to live life and be a good person and the importance of it. Because people he had and he hired in his band, their personality mattered to him. It wasn't solely based on their playing.
What kind of band was it? Was it a trio or did you have some horns or what was it like most of the time?
He had two bands. He had the Mogu Miller Trio, and then he had Wingspan. Um, and the Mogu Miller Trio, when I first joined, it was me, myself, and Tony Reedus on drums. And then shortly after that, it was Kareem Riggins replaced Tony Reedus. And then Wingspan, when I first got in the band, it was the same rhythm section with Kenny Garrett on sax, but Kenny started doing his own thing. So Mulgrew would get sometimes Wallace Roney on trumpet, or most of the time was Steve Wilson or Antonio Hart on sax, and then Steve Nelson on vibes.
Cool.
So that was but he would do a lot of times he would do trio with a special guest, like, and so I got to play with Johnny Griffin and who else
Ooh.
um Stanley Turntine, um I can't Gary Bartz. Yeah, we would do a lot of
Wow,
uh play with a lot of these greats and stuff.
that's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
I want to ask you about two other people. You could answer in any order you like, but I want to hear about Ron Carter and I want to hear about Ray Brown. So take your pick.
Oh man. they're oh, man, they're both amazing. I mean, just ridiculously amazing bass players and such different personalities too. And their playing is like completely different. Ron was first when I got to New York. I was, playing with Mulgrew, and I really wanted to study with him. And I was having some issues, technical issues on the bass. And Peter Washington, who was always in my corner, like kind of looking out for me, he's like, man, yeah, you should study with Ron. He would hook all that stuff up. So Mulgrew told me, he's like, well, listen, I have a tour coming up with Ron next week. I'll talk to him. He talked to Ron and he said, here's Ron's number, call him. He said he'd be happy to give you lessons. I called Ron for a year. He wouldn't pick up. I just called him like first, like every other day, then every other week, and then a few times when he wouldn't return my call. And so finally, I found out he taught at City College. I go up there. It's a snowstorm, and it's I go up there early in the morning, and from Brooklyn all the way up to Harlem, 135th Street, and look all around the college. Just anyone know Ron Carter? Where can I find Ron Carter? And a janitor there said, "Oh, this is his office, but he's not in today. But you can see his schedule. He has a class at 9." So I go back the next morning. I get there at 8. Waited. He showed up at 9:30. I said, "Mr. Carter, can I speak to you about studying with you?" He said, "Yeah, meet me back here at 2 o'clock." And I'm like, "Okay, I just rode an hour and a half on the train. Uh, well, can I maybe sit in on your ensemble? I just came from Brooklyn." He just looks at me and says, "No." Okay, I'll be back at 2. I
Yeah.
come back at 2 o'clock. He said, all right, you want to study? I said, yeah. He said, meet me here next week at 2 o'clock. Like, you couldn't have told me that 4 hours ago. Then the first lesson, he says, take out that bass, and I'm tuning it. And I used to not play with an amp. I was always like, I used to be very acoustic and high strings and pulled the strings really hard. So I got the bass, I'm pulling the strings real hard. He said, wait, 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 wait. Why would you pull the strings like that? I said, well, I want to get a big sound. He said, I understand the sound, but I don't want to hurt your feelings, but that's an awful sound. And he said, why don't you play with an amp? I said, well, the amp messes up my sound. He said, no, the amp amplifies your sound. Your sound was messed up before you plugged into that amp. And it seemed harsh. He was so dead on point.
But he wasn't
And,
talking about the instrument, though. He was talking about you and your hand.
right,
Okay.
exactly. He said, the better sound you can get out of your instrument, the harder it is for an amp or a sound man or anyone to mess it up, you know. And now I listen to records of mine before I studied with Ron Carter and after. It's night and day what he
Well,
did for my
give me
sound.
something. What accounts for that change? What did you do differently as a result of something you learned from Ron Carter? We want to know.
Okay, one thing is on acoustic bass, you have to understand how the bass resonates and how to make the bass resonate. And it's not always just pulling really hard. And it depends on how high your strings are and how low they are. Because if especially if your strings are not that high and you pull too hard, you'll get less sound because you choke the strings. And different ways to let the strings ring and to get the open strings, to get the bass resonating and everything. Also, where you pull on the string to get a more focused sound or more punchy sound. And if you play higher on the neck, it'll be real round and big, and but it's not it's hard to hear the point of the note. It's you don't get as much attack.
Yeah.
And and so if you can pull lower, the strings are a little tighter. It has a more focused sound. So even if it's not as big of a sound, even if you're not pulling as hard, it cuts through a lot more. And it's a prettier sound, and it's a more yeah, more focused and distinct sound. And you can hear what you're doing more. People can hear what you're doing more.
Yeah.
And one thing he also talked about is getting an even sound. I think maybe for 2 months, all we did was an F major scale in half position, just one octave
Yeah.
with a metronome. And like, I think I got this. But no, he had me getting my tone even for every note, every string. And part of that is pulling the same way. You pull with this finger and this finger, they have two different sounds. You pull up here or you pull down here, it's a different sound. And you see different bass players switching fingers and playing in different parts. And the sound, but you hear Ron's when he walks, the sound is so even, no matter if he's high or low, what string, it doesn't matter. It's so even, unless he's intentionally wants it to be, you
Yeah.
know, uneven.
I love that. Wow. I'm gonna pass that along in my instructional
Yeah,
resources.
yeah.
You know who was really big on getting a great sound was Ray Brown.
Oh my God, yes. I,
So
you know, I only studied with Ray. I had maybe 4 lessons with Ray, and I met him. I was playing with Russell Malone, and we were in Spain for a week, and Ray Brown was there for a week, and we were having lunch, and Russ, Richie, you need to ask Ray for a lesson. I was scared of Ray. I was nervous, but he's like such a nice guy and everything. So I asked him, I said, Mr. Brown, is it possible to have a lesson or something while we're here? He said, oh yeah, sure. You free tomorrow too? I was like, yeah. He said, come to my room, bring your bass.
what is it
And
about
we
2 o'clock with these guys? They all seem to like
I
two
don't know. I
o'clock.
could be wrong. It could have been 1 o'clock, but it was in the afternoon. And but I brought my bass. We hung out for about 2 or 3 hours, and he was getting me to know the bass a lot more. Different positions. I would play in in the on the lower positions. I could play for days. In the upper positions, I was on the G string and the D string. But, he was getting me to play higher on the neck, on the E and A, and we dealt with thumb positions, and I didn't used to play in thumb position that much. And we dealt with the bow, you know, and yeah, and he was real conscious about sound and swing and getting and feel. We worked on feel, you know. So but he wasn't he his approach was Ron Carter had a more kind of like scientific approach. Ray was just like, I was playing with the bow. I'm timid. He said, man, just pull that thing. Just pull it. Yeah, just don't worry about it.
I
So,
love it. I did. I am privileged to have seen him perform live. I can't remember the name of the club. It was in New York and it was in the late '80s. Mickey Roker was on drums, and
oh wow.
I
Yeah,
can't.
I got to play with Mickey. I've been blessed to like I got to play with a lot of the greats, before they passed away. and I got to play drummers. I'm speaking of, and I got to play with Billy Higgins, Mickey Roker, Ben Riley, Elvin Jones,
Woo.
just like you know, so many of these greats. And so I got to understand um, how they do things and the relationship between the bass player and the drummer, how they see it. And I always I knew the bass and drums has have to be locked, but a lot of younger drummers, I felt they were when you played with them, you had to lock with them. Everything it was on their terms basically.
Hmm.
Um, with the older cats, it's not. It's like we're in this together.
Wow.
Wherever you go, and it was almost like there was no wrong with them. Anywhere I put the beat, it was fine. And it's just this fluidity when you play with them. It's just I don't know how to, just like the biggest bed, like to lie in, just this big cushion, and there was no wrong you could do. It was just great.
Wow. Oh, I can get off on a whole other tangent and go down a whole other rabbit hole there, but I think we ought to keep this base focused.
Yeah.
What's keeping you busy now? What are you doing these days?
Wow. Well, I have my own band with vibraphonist Chin Chin Lu
Yes.
called Connected, which oh my God, I'm loving that band. Um, because as we were talking about my my roots in music, it's R&B, gospel, and rock, metal, and jazz. There's so many influences. And we in Connected, we just kind of mix she's from Taiwan and she comes from a classical background. So we're mixing, Taiwanese melodies and classical elements. And I'm putting funk in it, I'm putting a little rock in it, and we're
And
putting some gospel in it.
there was a very definite nod to Jocko in your latest album. You know what I'm talking.
Oh, yes, there is. Well, I thought I don't know if have you heard the SWV song they did, Rain, where they sampled Jocko, Portrait of Tracy.
Yeah,
And
I assumed that was
but
you.
huh?
I assumed that
No,
was you on the record.
I did I mean, on the record, yeah, it was me. But I covered SWV's version, but I did, a little homage to Jocko out front, and did a little Portrait of Tracy. But the whole song is based off of the Portrait of Tracy changes,
Yes.
you know. And so I'm doing that band Connected, and Lisa Fisher's band with Grand Baton is amazing. And I also am working with Gloria Gaynor.
Really? I Will
Yes,
Survive? Is that Gloria Gaynor?
exactly.
Wow.
Disco. So those are, and I'm doing a lot of Broadway show stuff.
Oh, I love that
Yeah, it's up
record.
on.
I did a ton of that. I love it.
Yeah, so I'm keeping it eclectic as I have all my life.
You had me thinking about when you're talking about adjusting the action on the bass and the strings higher, the strings low. I did a tour, national tour of a Broadway show called Into the Woods with Cleo
Oh,
Laine.
okay.
It was cool. Steven Sondheim came with the rehearsals, but I remember having my action a lot higher than I would have liked it, just because I had to. And during a rehearsal one time, the conductor's yelling at the rest of the orchestra, "Listen to the bass! Listen to the bass!"
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But I remember, well, it's a whole other long story that is not really relevant to you or what we're talking about. But I do want to ask you about, you've studied with some of the greatest bass players, and you've played with some of the greatest musicians on the planet. For Bass Players Only is primarily a music instruction site. And I've got people right now from all 50 states in the US. And I don't know, last time anybody counted, 50, 60 countries worldwide, whatever it is, coming to for bass players only every day to learn bass. And a lot of them, most of them are not, I don't think any of them are career bound. They are interested in learning. They never really had a chance to learn an instrument, and most of them are in their 50s, 60s, 70s. I've got students in their 80s, maybe a few in their 40s too. But the point is, they're not looking to make a career out of music. They want to play some classic rock riffs with their buddies. They want to play some blues
Right.
shuffles. They want to play some walking bass, maybe a little funk R&B. Some of them are into slapping, just for the enjoyment of it. So,
Yeah.
and one other thing I want to mention, when we get into our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, sometimes things like arthritis creep in, or tendonitis, or some of them are recovering from surgery. And I'm just trying to paint a picture to give you a context here, because I want to ask you, in light of all that, what advice can you impart to those people? What should their goals be? What should they be thinking about? What should they be working on, in your opinion, to satisfy what to get those results thereafter?
Well, I mean, I believe like I've been in the sports all my life, so I'm an amateur, and I learn about music through sports. I learn about sports through music, um, and but anything I do, I give it my best effort. So, like right now, I've been playing a lot of tennis, and I'm practicing as much as I can. I'm just working on different shots and just everything, taking lessons when I can and clinics. But I think it goes if you're an amateur musician, because and part of the reason I do that, the better I get, the more fun it is, and so I would just, even if you're doing it just for the fun of it, I mean, I still do this for the fun. I need to make money at the same time, but I still have a blast. I'm just so in love with music. But even if you're an amateur musician, number one, just spend as much time as you can with your bass and play it as much as you can, even if you're not working on scales or technique, you're learning bass lines. Um, Emulate those bass lines the best you can so that you get the same tone that they get, you get the same feel, and it becomes more about the notes. I mean, more about just the notes and everything. Um, but
More than just the
that
notes to me. Right?
Right. More than just the notes. It's the feel, it's the sound and everything. But yeah, and that but that's part of practice in and of itself. Because you can practice scales all day. And I do encourage people to practice scales and different things. But you can learn so much just by emulating, taking a bass player. How is this? Why does this guy sound so good? And you try to figure out what they're doing. Like that's one thing I remember Ray Brown learning a Ray Brown solo, and it didn't seem that difficult. But when I played it, it sounded nothing like what he was playing. But I know I was playing the right notes. But
Right.
there's little inflections and the feel, the timing. He was, way behind the beat or something, or just the accents, where he puts the accents. It's an endless tunnel you can go through. And so I mean that's what I would say. Like keep if you don't have to make money at it, keep it fun, but the more you practice, the more fun it becomes, you know.
Yeah, you're saying
So
a
that's what
lot
I
of
say.
very informative, inspiring, and educational things that I personally am getting a lot out of. Because there's some things that I may have thought about here and there, but you know what? There's some things that maybe I don't think about enough. And I thank you for sharing all those things that you share.
Oh, no problem.
Hey, tell me about your basses and your gear and your equipment and your arsenal of stuff.
Well, okay, first of all, I should preface this with I'm not really like a gearhead like a lot of people.
Neither am
And,
I.
okay, good. And guys have all these, oh, I just got this bass, I just got this bass. I'm a one bass guy. And meaning I have several basses at home, but I fall in love with whatever bass I'm playing, that's the bass I'm bringing to every gig for the most part. But so right now I'm playing a Federa, the Emperor Standard Custom. Uh, it's a five string maple neck. Oh my God, it's the most amazing thing I've ever played in my life. Um, and if somebody really, I have what's the Marcus Miller line of
Sire,
bass?
sire.
Sire, yeah. I have a Sire uh P bass if somebody really wants a P bass, but you know, normally I use the front pickup on my Federa to get a more of a P bass sound, but
Which pickup? Yeah,
and
I didn't hear you. The,
the front
oh,
pickup,
the front pickup. Yeah.
yeah, will give me a little more of a P bass sound,
Mhm.
but if I really need a P bass, I will play that, but for the most part, it's my Federa. Um, and I have one acoustic bass I have three acoustic bass.
Wow.
Only one have I ever played on a gig that I've had since I graduated Berkeley in 91. I got it at Boston String Instruments. It's a German flatback bass made around 1850.
Ooh.
And every year the thing gets it sounds better, it feels better. I'm so in love with this thing. I'm, you know, not looking for another acoustic bass. I'm not looking for another electric bass. Now I use some pedals, uh I use my Fishman pedals.
Oh,
I use Diodario strings on my bass on both basses. And on the acoustic bass, I like the Diodario pizzicatos.
mhm.
Um, Occasionally I'll change them if I know I'm going to be doing a lot of bowing because they kind of suck for bowing. But I like a real bright sound because I'm on acoustic bass. I'm playing a lot of groove bass stuff um, on acoustic bass as well. It's not always straight ahead, so I like the bright sound that cuts through.
You use a Fishman
Um,
pickup on your upright also?
I go back and I use the Fishman pickup on my upright, but usually on the road I have the gauge realist.
Ah,
It's easier to manage and put on different basses if I don't like the pickup they have. And I also use the Fishman Platinum Pro Platinum, whatever it's called, the EQ box, which is a lifesaver.
I know Fishman makes some incredible stuff.
They do. And a lot I and it's great when I'm playing both basses. Now most gigs I'm playing both upright and electric. So I have an A B switch, but and they go into the same amp, same channel, but I'll EQ the amp for the electric bass, and then my acoustic bass goes through my Fishman, and I can EQ it there and set everything so I can just go between both basses and sounds like I wanted to.
I'm sure those pickups and those effects are just magnifying the magnificent sound you are no doubt getting from your hands.
Well, uh, uh, it is more about the sound that the bass player gets. Because I'm so in love with my Fishman pickup, the full circle pickup.
Right.
But when I play the Gauge Realist pickup, I'm like, I mean, it still sounds like me.
Yeah.
I would hear Ray Brown complain about certain amps he would use. I'm like, okay, but sounds like Ray Brown to me.
Yeah. It's funny when somebody else plays your bass or you play somebody else's bass, they still sound like them, even if they're playing my bass. I still sound like me, even if I'm playing that other person's bass. So,
Right, right.
to your point. What about the future? You mentioned a lot of things that you're working on now. Is there anything that you've either wanted to do that you haven't gotten around to yet, or is there something that's percolating right now that's in the works? Anything that you can share?
Well, mainly I'm working on the volume 2 for Connected for the band with Chin Chin Lu. And that's the main thing. I hope to be doing more Broadway stuff. I really love to do that. I would love to get my own Broadway show.
Hmm.
Um, that's the goal, but uh, eventually, I'm not teaching at a university right now. I do some private lessons. I do workshops and clinics, but eventually, I do want to teach. I would love to teach at Berkeley. But right now I'm doing some, production work, and just writing and touring and I don't feel that I have the time to really dedicate to teaching like I would like to. So maybe that's a chapter I'll visit a little later in life or something. But for right now, touring with my band and Lisa Fisher and these Broadway shows, I'm digging it.
Where are you? Where are you? You're out on the East Coast, right?
Yeah, I'm in New York, but I left Brooklyn about 15 years ago and moved to Westchester, Peekskill, New York.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
So,
Padero's in Brooklyn, by the way, aren't they?
yeah, I still go there. They take care of me.
Yeah. Well, oh, I do have one more question for you. I've kept you a long
Okay.
time. One more question. What would you be if you were not a bass player? It's got to be something outside of music. You can't say a drummer or a vibraphonist or saxophone player or anything like that.
Um, I'll tell you the two things that I could imagine. Uh, Number one is a professional athlete. That's what I always wanted to do. My main sport was football. Eventually, like by the time I was doing it as really young. But high school, my first year of high school was my last year of football. I started realizing I was small. I thought I was big. I had a big spirit, and I was really good too. And I
What
I think
position?
I could have done it everything. I played my last 2 years. I was quarterback. Um, yeah, but I'm sure I'm 5'8", so short for a quarterback. I played running back and I played defensive back. I was one of the quick, fast guys and everything, and I like to hit hard. But so it was either professional athlete or a chef because I love food. I'm a foodie. I love to cook, and yeah. So I think those are the only two things I could imagine myself doing.
Okay. Well, my Lions came this close, and they lost a couple of their big coaches because they were with such a
Yeah.
team in the playoffs. So maybe you can join the Lions,
Yeah.
not as a player, but
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I think after I mean it was during high school I realized as much as I would love to do football, that was, music was my calling.
well, you know what? Keep doing what you're doing. It seems to be working out for you, and we're all happy to see and hear all the stuff that you're doing, and look forward to seeing what you're going to come up with next.
Thanks so much. Man, this has been awesome talking to you, John.
Thank you. You too, Richie. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you
Thanks, man.
so much. And I hope our paths will cross soon and often. I'd like to meet you in person and, of course, see and hear you play live.
That would be great. And you're in Florida, right?
No, I was down there for
Oh,
six.
you're in Detroit. Are you still in Detroit?
I'm in central Michigan right now, or mid
Oh,
Michigan,
okay.
in the Lansing area. But
Okay.
did grow up just outside Detroit. So yeah, that's I was born in Cleveland. My dad was a rock and roll DJ in the 50s and 60s, and he would
Oh, wow.
the first ever morning shows. And they recruited him and his on-air partner, and we all moved right in the middle of the school year, right in January. I was in first grade, and picked
Oh, wow.
moved to the Detroit area, and that's where I did most of my growing up.
Okay. Well, I'll definitely reach out next time I'm in that area.
Awesome.
And it would be great to link up.
I'll do the same when I'm out your way. Thank you so much,
Yes.
Richie. Much appreciated, and thank you. I love what you're doing, and thanks for spending this time with me. This was awesome.
Thanks so much for having me, John. Nice to talk base with you.
You too. Thanks.
All right. See you.
Were those some great stories or what? I love hearing about Ron Carter and Ray Brown and Mulgrew Miller and everything else. Great, great. If you ever get a chance to see Richie live and in person, he does a lot of touring, a lot of performing. You definitely want to check him out. And if you've ever wanted to learn bass, you should know that right now there are thousands of people inside the For Bass Players Only community, a lot of them in their 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s. And you know what they're doing? They're learning bass. They're having the time of their life playing music that they love. Come join them and experience that incredible transformation for yourself. You're going to love it. You're never too old to groove. I will see you right back here next week, same time, same place, with another bass player interview. In the meantime, I'm John Liebman. Let's play bass.